Nelson Mandela, for 27 years, he was imprisoned. And then finally, at the end of apartheid, he was set free. And then just not very long later, he wore the jersey of the football team, their sports team, and walked into the stadium with a glow and with a shining and a beauty and an open heart, creating peace. Right into the midst of those who had oppressed the black people, those who were kind of pushing back and were thinking of themselves better. So, 27 years in prison. If anyone had any right whatsoever to be bitter, to hate, to be just worked up and fighting and being done with life, who was it? Nelson Mandela. There is a different way, and I think he embodied that. What is that way? And that's where we come to the parable of Jesus, where Peter comes to Jesus and says, this guy here is really annoying. He's really pushing my buttons. He's a pain in the behind. I can't stand him. Should I let it go one time? Should I let it go 2 times, 3 times? How do I get along with him? Is there a limit to forgiveness? And Jesus says, you know what? To live, this is how I understand it, to be truly forgiving and letting go is when we live in this realm of forgiveness. And the First Nations Bible study put it so beautifully. The Lord's Prayer, forgive us as we forgive others. It says, release others. You see, when you are hurt, when you are hurting, you're tied together by this hurt. You're stuck in it. And by releasing and letting go and forgiving, you actually release yourself too from that bondage. Can you see that? We're shackled by the hurt, by the pain, by the guilt, by the upsetness. By letting go and releasing, something happens to us. And I think that's what Mandela did. And I think that's the way of Jesus. The old way and how I grew up with, and how I often think of is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And if you are being punched, you gotta punch back harder, because otherwise you're being punched again. Now, Oliver got it already. You walk away. Make good choices, Wendy, yes. But the equality or the fairness or the kind of you do as you have been done unto, you just stand your ground, you don't back down, you show posturing, and you hit or whatever. So that will teach you. Don't we all have that attitude? But Jesus says and invites us into this realm of love where we can love even people whom we don't like, the love of enemies. Walter Everett, a local Methodist pastor who is retired and passed on, his son was murdered by Jim Carlucci. I don't remember all the circumstances. Walter Everett losing his son to brutal murder is beyond anything I can imagine. And he shared here with us in our fellowship hall during one of the hot topics, he felt the deepest hurt, the pain, the anger, the rage, everything, every single deepest feeling of being torn apart. And at the same time, he heard this small little voice when he got a letter from Jim Carlucci in prison trying to connect with him. Had a hard time responding to it. But slowly and slowly, he found a way of, at some point, visiting Jim Carlucci in prison, warming up, letting go, and of deep healing. I see sometimes people who hold a bitterness, a hurt, an anger, a rage for the rest of their lives. They're arrested, frozen, tied up, shackled in that. Jesus says there is a better way. Rather than the retribution, you hurt me, I'll hurt you back. You don't like me? Well, I'll show you who is in charge. And we all know those stories and those experiences. So Jesus shows us a better way. What is that way? Jesus being the host at the table, Jesus inviting us all in there. Jesus dining with sinners, with lost, with prostitutes, with tax collectors, with those whom we consider scum. Just we wouldn't associate with them, period. He invites them to the table. And when I get to that table, I think like, I'm not sure I want to sit with them at the table. I still think of myself just a little bit better, so I'm definitely a holdout. Until, hopefully at some point, I recognize that I am as much in need of grace and of forgiveness as anyone else. In Galatians, Paul writes, as Jesus broke down the separations, the split in between, and you cannot imagine these oppositions more strongly than during Paul's early church time. Jews and Gentiles, you don't mix, period. Opposite camps. Same in between slaves and free. You don't mix, like the caste system. You keep separate. And Paul writes, this is what happens with Jesus. He overcomes, he builds the bridge. He invites us to the table of peace, of grace, of sharing, transcending or bringing together the Jews and the Gentiles, the slaves and the free, the women and the men. And we can add to that, can we not? Republicans and Democrats, vegetarians and meat eaters, Americans and who would you add? And think of yourself, the opposite of you, whatever you are not, is invited by Jesus to the table to have a conversation, to eat, to be nurtured. And there is room at Christ's table for everyone. Now, very practically, how do we make peace? Well, Wendy shared it very beautifully. Just listening. Listening deeply when the kids come upset. Say, he did this, or she hurt me, or whatever. The first thing is listen. Tell me your story. What happened? Well, he broke my toy. He threw it against the wall, whatever. And then once they feel understood and heard, you can go one step further and think like, well, how did this all start? And that's when you hold up the mirror and the dark side may come through and you may get somewhere. But if you don't listen at the beginning, you're missing something out. Mother Teresa said it so beautifully. Peace can begin with just a smile. Smile 5 times, she says, at someone every day that you don't like so much. Smile. And when I think of smile, not a smile with all generosity and warmth of heart. The value of a smile, it costs nothing, but it creates much. It enriches those who receive it without impoverishing those who give it. It happens in a flash, and the memory of it sometimes lasts forever. None are so rich that they can get along without it, and none so poor that they would not be richer for its benefit. It creates happiness in the home, fosters goodwill in business, and is the countersign of friends. It is rest to the weary, daylight to the discouraged, sunshine to the sad, and nature's best antidote to trouble. Yet it cannot be bought, begged, borrowed, or stolen, for it is something that is no earthly good to anyone till it is given away. And if in the course of a busy day, some people should forget to give you one, maybe we ask you to leave one of yours. For nobody needs a smile so much as those who have none left to share. A smile. So whom will you release this week? Whom will you smile at?